Before we start the planned content of the video, sorry, this is me recording at a different time if it sounds different and weird. But as many of you might know, there was the ICJ hearing that was supposed to determine whether Israel was committing genocide in Palestine or not. And basically, the ICJ said, yes, you hit the conditions of what would be considered a genocide. But that ruling has not really done anything to materially help the people in Palestine. At time of recording, we are now, I believe, 126 days into the Israeli occupation committing genocide against the Palestinians. And seemingly, Western governments have pulled funding from UNRWA in retaliation for this ruling. So I'm going to include a link to UNRWA and other organizations where the money's going to Palestine. But yeah, if you have the means, please, please, please donate to one of these groups. And while we all have eyes on Palestine, rightfully so, we can't lose sight of the fact that genocides are happening elsewhere at the same time. It's free Palestine, it's free Sudan, it's free Congo. Continue following the BDS boycott list. Don't buy any tech if you don't need it. And buy secondhand if you can for what you do need. Keep talking about Yemen, keep talking about Kashmir, keep talking about Armenia, keep talking about Tigray, keep talking about Syria, keep talking about Cameroon. Like, the list goes on and on. There are so many places that are being devastated because of our culture of white supremacy and colonization and capitalism. Please find a way to get involved with your community. We all should be getting involved in our community in some capacity because it's very clear that most politicians only care about doing what works for capitalism, and they don't actually care about the people that they allegedly are supposed to work for. This isn't necessarily me trying to say voting doesn't matter. Like, I think local elections can be very, very important. So if you have the ability to vote, I personally think local elections are worthwhile to participate in. If you are passionate about voting, I really urge you to look into third-party options for presidential candidates. I've heard about Claudia de la Cruz and Jasmine Sherman, and I know there's a handful of others. I'm really, really impressed by Jasmine Sherman, and they have a ton of comprehensive plans on their website, so I'm also going to link that in the description as well. One last thing that I want to say, COVID rates are kind of going crazy right now. Please, please, please continue masking or start masking again if you've stopped. There was a new vaccine released back in September. So if you haven't gotten that and you have the ability to do so, I would suggest getting it because the previous vaccines don't offer any protection for the dominant variants that we have right now. But yeah, I think that's it. So let's get to the actual video. Hi, hello, it's Rachel. So it's February, aka the romance month. So I wanted to talk about the ultimate romance film, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman. So before we get to the fun film analysis, we have to acknowledge the fact that this is a film based on real people. So some facts should be established. So firstly, Olive was in her very early 20s when she met the Marstons. During her senior year of college, And as the film presents, she worked for William as a research assistant at this time. So it's not known for a fact that William became involved with Olive at this point, because while the movie tells the story that William and Elizabeth became romantically and sexually involved with Olive within, I think, 3 or 4 months of meeting her, according to the very basic digging that I did through Wikipedia, Olive had known the Marstons for 5 years before her first pregnancy. So it's hard to tell when exactly the relationship started within that time frame. Either way, this is definitely a questionable start of a relationship, as one, William was in a position of power over Olive if they did indeed start the relationship at this time, and two, the 11-year age gap when Olive had barely entered her 20s is a bit concerning. Like, I, as a 28-year-old, find the idea of getting involved with a 22-year-old to be incomprehensible. But again, these are real people, and the film is attempting to be truthful about the relationship. Although I'm sure things were like dramatized and sanitized for entertainment purposes. I also want to say that I really appreciate Angela Robinson not trying to obfuscate this reality or aging up Olive, like many biopics have done when it comes to touching on romantic relationships that involve age gaps. Like, I am also clearly wary of such a dynamic, but lying about the reality to try to glorify someone and attempting to shield them from criticism is something I think is just more nefarious. Secondly, while it is impossible to know the specifics of Elizabeth and Olive's relationship, as both the sapphic relationship between the two of them and polyamory in general would have been very taboo at the time. I mean, hell, it's almost a century later, and polyamory is still pretty taboo. Even if Elizabeth and Olive were not sexually involved like the film depicts, there's a lot to prove that they had a very intimate bond. Elizabeth, Olive, and William all lived together for approximately 20 years. Elizabeth named her daughter after Olive. The original Wonder Woman comics do have a lot of lesbian subtext, and it's clear that Diana was inspired by both Elizabeth and Olive in different ways. So it stands to reason that the lesbianism in the comics was inspired by the two of them as well. And then there's the fact that Elizabeth and Olive lived together for another 40 plus years after William's death. Like, it's undebatable that Elizabeth and Olive loved each other very deeply, even if we will never know the actual form that that took. Also, I will be discussing spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers of a 6-year-old film, this is your time to exit the video, I guess. Um, so, as I have vaguely alluded to, Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman is the story of William Marston, the man who created the Wonder Woman comics, and the two women that inspired her creation, his wife Elizabeth and their lover Olive. The bare bones of Professor Marston follows your typical romance story, or at least your typical romance story that isn't a tragedy. There's the meet cute of Olive meeting William and Elizabeth, who, for all intents and purposes of the film's construction, you can kind of think of them as a unit. There's the blatantly verbalized initial attraction on William's end. There's the unspoken but equally as blatant mutual attraction between Elizabeth and Olive. And Olive is already drawn to the brilliant minds of the Marstons. We see the three of them continually getting closer as they work together. There's the reluctance to voice feelings and the yearning until it just becomes too hard to ignore, and the three of them finally act on it and officially enter a relationship. There's the trials that they have to contend with, namely the Marstons losing their jobs at the university once this relationship is found out, leading to difficulties of acquiring work and money. But after those bumps are smoothed out, things seem to be close to perfect until suddenly they're not. There's the dramatic breakup when Elizabeth pushes Olive away, causing all three of them to be miserable, and leading to William and Elizabeth apologizing for this mistake and pleading for Olive to take them back, which, of course she does. This is a romance film celebrating polyamory. Of course we get the happy ending. Thank you, Angela Robinson. But there's also a very poignant story about realizing you are cisgender attracted when existing in a homophobic society. A story that I definitely related to as a lesbian, and I'm sure a large portion of other LGBTQ viewers also related to. While the title implies that the film centers around William, I'd say most of the focus falls onto Elizabeth. At the start of the film, Elizabeth has these moments with Olive that are very charged, but she seems completely oblivious of her feelings until Olive kisses her. She's horrified by the realization and quickly rejects Olive, leading to a depression as she processes these feelings further. Too stubborn to admit that she missed Olive and that she reciprocates these feelings, even to herself, finally forced to do so through her husband's prodding while she's hooked up to the lie detector. Even though she acknowledges that she has some sort of feelings for Olive upon restarting a friendship with her, even going so far as to tell Olive she's open to pursuing a sexual relationship. Some of the dialogue in this film is wild. She's still reluctant to accept that these feelings are more intense and that casual sexual exploration with Olive isn't something she can just get out of her system and move on from. Elizabeth continues trying to deny this newfound piece of herself until Olive admits that she shares these desires, while also taking a lie detector test. Elizabeth becomes more and more comfortable in her sapphic identity as they get settled in their new life, but as dialogue in the film even calls out, it's clear that she still feels shame about her relationship with Olive. Elizabeth is always the most pessimistic about their dynamic, always the most terrified of being found out. Elizabeth is the one who ends the relationship upon facing backlash from their neighbors, unequivocally accepting their assertion that this relationship is quote-unquote perverted. She loves Olive, but her fears outweigh that love, and she desperately tries to return to a life before Olive. After William has a health scare, he facilitates the two of them meeting and urges Elizabeth to make up with Olive. Elizabeth finally submits to her feelings, no longer giving in to her fear and the facade of control that she clung to, no longer willing to repress herself and appease others. While the aspect of polyamory does give a fresh spin on things, I'm sure anyone listening to my breakdown of this film has recognized these elements. The film's narrative is very formulaic, which in my opinion makes it all the more revolutionary. Angela Robinson makes the narrative as comfortable and recognizable as she can, while weaving in the truth of these three people. Because of this familiarity, Robinson can play with ideas of romance and relationships and sex. If the narrative wasn't so simple and familiar, the audience would be more likely to perceive the relationship as something sensationalized and less willing to accept it as normal. But this is a film that asks for understanding, that wants the audience to have an open mind and be adventurous. The film touches on many things that could be considered extreme or shameful, and it covers these topics without judgment. One of the things I adore most about this film is how it handles consent. Like, every step of the William Elizabeth Olive relationship relies heavily on explicit consent. We see it in the small moments, such as William hesitating to hug Olive after he and Elizabeth have their breakthrough about creating the lie detector, or other moments like the fact that the three of them have to verbalize sexual and romantic interest all through the lie detector test to prove how genuine these feelings are before they even consider acting on them. One of the most noticeable moments, stressing the importance of consent, is in the scene where the three of them make love for the first time, when William literally waits for Elizabeth to invite him over after he sees Elizabeth and Olive passionately kissing. He's standing in the doorway, ready to walk away and let the two of them share this moment without him. And if it weren't for Elizabeth literally offering her hand to him, he would have. Another standout moment underscoring the importance of consent is the scene where Elizabeth ties up Olive for the first time. Elizabeth initially tries to stop Olive from participating, but upon seeing that Olive is genuinely interested in the act, agrees to do it with her. And Elizabeth continually checks in on her during the process to make sure that Olive is okay, and she wants to keep going. This film is by far one of the best depictions of consent that I've ever seen, and hopefully we are moving into an era where depictions like this are the norm, given intimacy coordinators are starting to become more prominent in the industry. I also love the way that this film is so non-judgmental about kink. We have a scene where William and Elizabeth are voyeurs to Olive non-sexually spanking a sorority pledge member. It's kind of like a hazing thing. But the act becomes very sexually charged as Olive and Elizabeth make prolonged eye contact and William gives Elizabeth a hand job. The film even treats it borderline clinically afterwards, as William asks Olive to discuss how participating in the spanking felt for her. While Olive is embarrassed to talk about it, William's openness expresses to the viewer that there should be no shame attached to such an act. Then there's, as I've already kind of discussed, the fact that the lie detector becomes part of their foreplay. And then there's like other things like the casual way that Olive and Elizabeth tie up and restrain William, which, like, to be fair, I'm pretty sure restraint usage is probably one of the more popular BDSM practices. But at least from like media depictions, restraint usage is usually portrayed as like scandalous or shocking. And in Professor Marston, it's just like a thing they happen to do sometimes. Like it's very casual. And of course, as I was just saying, in the consent segment, we have the rope scene, which also I didn't mention. Actual sex workers who do rope work were consulted for the movie to like make sure it was done safely. And we love that. We love seeing a Black lesbian director actually respecting sex workers and going to them for input. Like, fantastic. More of this, please. I must also discuss that I love the way this film depicts masculinity. William is always gentle and patient. He's passionate about his research, and he really wants to help people break free of harmful conditioning that they've grown up with. I was so pleasantly surprised by William's defense of Olive and Elizabeth's relationship. In fact, the few moments we ever see him be angry, it's due to people condemning Olive and Elizabeth's relationship. Like, the one and only scene where he reacts to someone with violence is because that person literally called Elizabeth and Olive perverts. Like, well, there's no true way to know how accurate this is, and it could just be the film trying to, like, make a sanitized version of Marston. Like, fictional William has the utmost respect and admiration for Elizabeth and Olive, and, like, his number one concern is their happiness. He just loves them wholeheartedly, and that love is so blatant because you see it in the way he talks about Diana. And it's just like, damn, the way lesbians write men is truly unmatched. I love it so much. Um, One last thing I want to point out, because I just think it's a brilliant observation. So, as you can tell, I love this film. I saw it in theaters when it came out, so I've known about this basically as long as it's existed. And I've been recommending this to friends since then. So like if someone is asking for romance movie recommendations, like this is the number one thing that's coming out of my mouth. So anyway, I recommended this to a friend. She watched it not too long after, And she pointed out to me that the final scene plays out like a wedding, which is something I had never considered. But once that thought is in your head, it's impossible not to see it that way. Olive is wearing white while Elizabeth is wearing black. Elizabeth vowing to love Olive for the rest of her days. While it definitely is a moment for the three of them, in my opinion, it really solidifies that this movie is a love letter to Elizabeth and Olive, to the women responsible for Wonder Woman's existence. Um, as William is mostly just there to guide Elizabeth to fully accept herself and embrace happiness. His own personal feelings are very much in the background for this scene, and it's Elizabeth's arc coming full circle as she is fully and unabashedly embracing her feelings for Olive finally. There is so much more that I love about this film. Like the way the structure ties into Marston's disc theory and replicates his way of thinking about the world. Um, the cinematography is stunning. The acting is incredible. Obviously, I love the story. There's just so much to praise about this film, and it is so underrated. And I need more people to watch it and just fall in love with it like I did. um, and there's probably more I could say, but I didn't want this to be super long. And I also don't want to spoil more of the film than I already have. So I hope I've gushed enough to convince anyone who hasn't seen it to watch it. And happy Valentine's Day.